Alright, in this tutorial we are going to style our resume so our resume looks a little cleaner and more professional in our page, and it'll also set up some of the basic styling for the rest of our portfolio. So we're going to 7-3 on our uh, inserting content and styling on our content guidelines here. So I'm going to toggle over to Dreamweaver here to where we left off, and this is why we're going to style our resume. Everything's pretty jumbled together. You can't really read it very well, and so we want to make it look pretty nice. We're going to try to see if we can't make it look similar to what our Word document looks like. We have some, larger font sizes and the headings. We have, nice spacing over everything. And if you remember right, when we did our careers unit back in the beginning of the school year, I harped a lot about consistency and spacing and the visual look of your resume. And so online, it's just as important. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's toggle back over to Dreamweaver, and we're going to jump back into code view and scroll up here towards the top of where we left off, and let's just kind of take a look at some of the elements that we're going to have to style, and we'll just go through kind of down the list, and we'll just go in order basically, somewhat. So at the top we have an H1 tag, so we have a heading 1. We also have other subheadings, so we have heading 2, so we definitely will need to style the heading 1 and heading 2 tag. We have paragraph tags. We also have an A tag, an A element. Now we've already styled an A element, but we've styled the A elements in different div tags. We've styled them in the nav bar and in the footer, but this A element is inside of the content div, so we are still going to have to style this element and give it a little bit of cool factor to it. We also have some bulleted lists. Remember, we have the UL and LI tags there, so we have 2 tags for the bulleted list to style. And as we scroll down, you'll also notice that we have a table to style, and we'll see how we approach that one as we get down there towards the bottom there. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to jump back into our CSS. So we're going to click Portfolio Main CSS here. And it's always a good idea that when you're doing styles that you keep your styles together in the same section. So we are going to be in the content ID area. So I'm going to scroll down to content, and all of our ID selectors, all of our selectors that we're going to be using for this tutorial are going to start off with the ID content, because that's the div tag that we are housed in. So we want to make sure that we're being specific about which tags we're styling, or more specifically which ID those tags are associated with, so that there isn't any kind of spillover into other areas of our portfolio. So I'm going to place my cursor right after that closing curly brace on line 61 on my screen, and I'm going to hit the enter return key a couple times so that I have some room to start here. So again, we're starting off with the div ID content. Okay, and we're going to open up our curly brace. Oh, sorry, we're not going to do that just yet. We're going to start off with all of the headings first. So we're going to do the heading 1 and the heading 2 first. We're just going to put those in order, and we're going to keep those in order within our styling, so that if we have to go back later on to fix anything, we can find where we've placed all those styles for our headings in the content div. Because you may want to change those later on to make your portfolio yours, to make it more individualized to your taste or to your style. Okay, so we're going to start off with the H1 and open up our curly brace and then hit the enter return key. So one of the first things that we need to do is give it some padding, and this will give us some spacing of the element around other things. Now, if you remember the very beginning of our tutorial, when we first started a tutorial of the portfolio, we cleared away all the default margin and padding values, and this will allow us to control those values in any kind of browser, so that we know it's going to have a consistent look in either Google Chrome or Safari or Mozilla Firefox. So we're going to start off with some padding here, and we're just going to do 5 pixels all the way around, and we're going to do it the shortcut key or shortcut way. So you notice that I just have 5 pixels listed, so that means all 4 sides there is getting the 5 pixel treatment. Next, we're gonna go ahead and for me, like, I like to do a slightly different font for, say, like, subheadings and things like that. And so before I go on to the next one, I'm just going to scroll up and show you what font I've chosen. So I've used a Lucida Grand, which is a sans serif. If you remember what a sans serif means, basically it just doesn't have the little, like, embellishments at the top of the ends of the text. So all of my text is going to get that no matter what. So I want my heading 1 to just be slightly different. And then so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a font family that is actually a serif font, just to stand out. So I want it to stand out from the other stuff, so I'm actually going to use a serif font. I tend to do this often with alternating between, say, serif and sans serif. Most of the time I tend to use a serif font, like, say, for regular text, like text that I use in content, for big blocks of it. And then I tend to reserve sans serif for headings. I've kind of done the opposite here. So I've done sans serif for all of my text. So I'm going to end up using more serifs for my headings. So I'm going to go ahead and choose one, and honestly I don't know which any of these look like, Cambria or Constantia or Baskerville. I think Baskerville actually looks pretty cool if I remember right. So I'm just going to choose that one, and make sure you end that line with a semicolon, and then hit the enter return key, and we're going to go ahead and tell our font what size we want it to be. So I'm going to type in font size, and we're going to use a little different font size here than what you normally used to. You notice in the drop down code hint menu we have fixed sizes. Well, what we're going to use is and those are pixels, by the way. We could use a percentage if we'd like. We can also use something called M. There's a lot of different options for font sizes in terms of the unit, the measuring unit of those. There are more common ones than others, but we are going to use M's, and that is EM. And the reason why we're going to use EM is because M's are a multiplier value, kind of like percentages, only M's multiply. I guess it's kind of like the reverse of percentages. So our font size is going to multiply whatever our default font size is at this time by 1.5 times. So our base font is whatever our base font size is, it's going to multiply that by 1.5 times. Okay. And so I think that's pretty much all I'm going to do here. We could give it a different color if you'd like, to make your name stand out a little bit more. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it as black, and so then I'm going to hit the enter return key there, and then drop down that. So I have my heading 1, and every once in a while it's probably a good idea to jump over to design view and check out what you've done, and you'll see that it's kind of jumped over there, and I do need to fix that eventually, fix my nav bar there, and I think I know what's wrong with this. Here, let's go back up here. Pretty sure that my header, for some reason, I thought it was 125 and actually should be 130 pixels. So some of you may have already had this problem, and I know we fixed it with some other people. And then that'll also help me fix my padding here that I've got going on. So because of this, my padding is forcing my name down here a little bit. If I switch to live view, it's going to take care of it. It's not going to be a problem. And it's still going to look like it should. Everything highlights where it should. So you notice there you go, my name has that sans serif and a little bit of padding there. Not much. It's really subtle, but as we start to put in the padding values for everything else, you'll start to see that things will space out nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and keep this live view button clicked so that when I jump back and forth here, it'll show it as we go. So I'm going to jump back to code, and we're still in our CSS portfolio main style sheet there. I'm going to scroll down to content H1, and then place my cursor after that closing curly brace there and hit the enter return key, and we're going on to our H2s now. So I'm going to type in content H2. Don't forget the pound symbol. And then open up our curly brace and hit the enter return key. So we're giving it the same treatment here in terms of padding. So 5 pixels padding. And for the font, now here you can choose whether or not you want to go ahead and do the same type of, say, like serif type font. Your call. I think for me, I'm going to go ahead and do that same treatment and give it that same font family. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight that group and then Command C or Control C and then come down and then paste that in there, so I can just save myself a little bit of time. Okay. There some people would do this a little bit differently, meaning that you can actually style your headings in multiple ways. So I could do content H1 and content H2 and all my headings in the same series or the same set of style, underneath the same one. But I wouldn't be able to individualize it, like say with different font sizes and stuff. So I still would have to go in and give each heading a different font size. But some people like it that way to do, like say if your padding and your font families are all the same, they like to lump those all together in one style and then individualize them separately underneath it. Totally a preference call there for you guys and for you future coders. Okay, so underneath content H2, we're going to do again a font size, and just select that font size, and this time we're going to do 1.25 EM, so it's just slightly smaller than the heading 1. And then I'm going to hit the enter return key. So here's the thing about fonts and headings and all that kind of stuff, because you're going to have multiple pages, and sometimes you're going to want to do slightly different things for those pages. So by just doing the bare minimum on these headings, like padding and font family and font size, I can go back later on and say create a unique class to apply to these headings if I want to do, say, something different, like a different color, or maybe I want to do all caps, something like that, or even if you want to underline or whatever it might be. The more specific you get on, say, like something like this, and if you have multiple pages and you want them to be different on each page, you can't do that using a style sheet, because they will all of our H1s and H2s on all of our pages are going to look the same in this way, and it's a time saver, yet also in a way, like if you want to individualize those pieces on each pages, you have to go in and style those differently. So just be aware of that. So as an example, I'm going to switch over to live view real quick, and I could say, like, put these all in caps, which I like to do a lot of times with headings, and heading 2s I do quite often, because it makes your heading stand out really nice and looks clean, and all that. But you'll notice that one of my rules is try not to style like things like each other that fall right below each other but are slightly different. So for instance, education is a subheading, and then right underneath that we have the title, Crater High School of Business, Innovation and Science, and I have that all in caps. So I wouldn't really want to put my subheading in all caps, because then that would take away the way that title stands out from the subheadings. So I kind of just want to be mindful. Same thing about using double bolds in a row. Like, I don't want to use bold on my title here and bold on my subheading. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll do the reverse, where I will make my subheading all caps but not bold, and then I'll make a title, say like Crater High School, I'll make that all like regular lowercase, and I will make it bold so it stands out. So just kind of like playing with those types of things. You just don't want to have the two together right below each other. Okay, all right, let's move on. Let's make some progress here and make it pretty quick. So you notice that we have some padding there that pushed it around it, and we have the different font type, and so we have a lot more to go here, so let's move forward. Alright, so the next element that I want to style is going to be the P tag, and the P tag we use quite a bit, and often, you know, in a lot of different pages. So again, for the P tag, we're not going to do a whole lot to this. So we're going to do content P, which is obviously paragraph, and open up a curly brace, and same treatment in terms of the padding. You'll notice that we want to stay consistent. We're going to stay consistent across the board here. So padding 5 pixels all the way around. We're going to keep the font family the same. The font size actually stays the same. What some people might like to do though, however, and make sure you end that line with a semicolon, is to give your paragraph or your lines some line height. So to make sure that your lines are spaced nicely between each other. Now this only works in paragraphs, well, it'll work in other elements, but in the paragraphs, in terms of this, the line height only applies to what the text inside of each paragraph tag. So it doesn't apply to, say, like if you have 2 paragraph tags, you know, the spacing between each of those paragraph tags. That's going to deal with padding and margin. Line height deals with those sentences that get wrapped, you know, if they wrap around, if they're longer, within a paragraph. So we're going to do a line height of 1.5 EM. I believe this is what we want. We can always go back and adjust that. We probably won't see much of a change in terms of our resume because we don't have a lot of long paragraphs on this page, but if we need to change that later on, we can. So I'm going to hit the enter return key here and then close that out with a curly brace. Next we have the bulleted lists, because we use those quite a bit on this page. And we don't have to do a whole lot with our bulleted list here, and so we're gonna do this real quick, and then we'll go back and see how our resume is starting to shape up after this. So we can kind of see how some of the padding is looking, and then we can make adjustments after that. So again, we're still in the same content div, and we're going to start off with the UL tag, right? Because we have the UL tag to style, and then the LI, which is the list items in each of those bulleted lists. And then I'm going to open up a curly brace, and for the UL tag, the only thing that I'm going to really change is the positioning of it. If you remember that, because we cleared out all the default margin and padding values, our bullet points are slammed way left. So we want this to come out a ways to the right. And so there's a couple of different ways we could do this. We could do this as 25 pixels left, or we could do this as 3 Ms, which is what I found to be equivalent to roughly 25 pixels. And 25 pixels is probably about, I want to say 5 spaces, a tab space over, like if you were to look at that in Microsoft Word. And so that's all we really need to do there. So I'm going to hit the enter return key and close that out with a curly brace. And then the next one is to style each of the LI tags. So on this one we're going to do content, but we're not going to do UL LI like we did previously for the nav bar styling. And the reason for this is because the LI is also the same tag that goes in ordered list, which uses the OL tag instead of the UL tag. We don't want to have to style that same, the same styling apply for OLs as we do with ULs. We want all the LIs to just basically be the same. So we're just going to say all the LI tags in the content div are going to do this, despite whether it's an ordered list or an unordered list. So it's going to affect both. So it'll save us time. So we're going to open up a curly brace there. And so all we're going to do here is we're going to add some padding on the top. So padding top, and we're going to do 0.15 EM, and we're going to do padding on the bottom. Okay, and you could do this as pixels too if you'd like, and for some reason my code hinting isn't coming up there. So padding bottom, okay, and 0.15 EM as well. So here's the deal, you could totally do pixels if you'd like, and I think this is probably the equivalent to about 2 or 3 pixels for the top or the bottom. And the reason why we're doing this is because we want a little bit of spacing between each of our bulleted list items. you can't do that with line height. Line height, isn't affected necessarily. The spacing between each list item. The way HTML sees that is each list item is its own separate element, and so line height doesn't get affected. So line height would only affect it as, say, if the bulleted list wraps, and we can go back and look at that. If we want to change that, we can change and add, say, a line height if you have a really long, piece of text in your bulleted list item, and you want a little bit more spacing because of that. And we can look at that. We might even have one like that in our resume. But this will give us spacing between each list item, which will make it a little bit more readable and a little bit more professional. So let's go ahead and Command Control S real quick and see where we're at. Let's click over here to Live View. And there we go. Kind of kicked over there. It took a minute. So you see, here's my paragraph up here. It gave us some spacing. You'll also notice that down here, there's my bullet points, and they got pushed over a little bit. And our spacing there looks pretty good between each bulleted item. Paragraph there. So now our resume is actually looking pretty straightforward. We haven't done a ton to it just yet. I mean, we've made some things here. Now you'll notice here on our piece here, we've got a little bit of an issue there. If you notice that our intermediate skills is slightly lower than our beginning skills, and this is because, remember, this is in a table. So let's back out of Live View real quick and go to Design View, and so we can kind of see what we need to do here. So the first thing is this. One is that tables, by default, if you come down here and look at our property inspector, the horizontal and vertical alignment, by default, I believe horizontal is left and vertical is like middle or centered. So the only way to change this, we don't actually do it in CSS. So my recommendation is that we set our vertical alignment here to top, so that, and we need to make sure we do that for both cells. So in that cell, it's set to top, and we should go ahead and set our horizontal alignment left, and then do the same thing into this right cell. So click into that right cell where beginning skills is and set that vertical alignment to top and then left. Okay, so now when I click on Design or Live View, those two things will appear to be on the same level. So see that right there. Okay. You'll notice though that our table in our Word document, let's kind of tab over here. In our Word document, what we've done is we've indented a little bit, our table indented a little bit, so that it appears that's part of computer skills, whereas right now in our Dreamweaver document it looks as if it's a separate category. Okay, we probably won't be able to eliminate this spacing here altogether with the table, so we're just going to have to indent it and roll with how that's going to look because of the padding and stuff that we've already put into place for our other elements. Okay, so let's go back to our code. And so here's the tricky thing about doing some styling and doing everything in a style sheet. If by natural you might be thinking, well, that's easy. All I have to do is with the table is say, okay, like I did with my bullet points, I just have to tell the margin of it to go to the right or margin left and push it over to the right a little bit. But remember, this isn't a table, and what if we don't want to do that for every single table that we're going to use in our design? So if we style a table to be indented 3 ems or 25 pixels, it will do that for every single table that we use in our entire design. And that may not be the case. Maybe we don't want it to look that way. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a class, and we'll just call it something like indent, and we will apply that class to the table tag. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back into the code, and I'm going to keep that class in the same area. Okay, some people like to put classes in one area, you know, maybe at the top or something like that. But I like to keep things, the styling, where I know it's going to be. Um, and so I'm going to place my cursor at the end of line 87 there and hit enter return. And I'm going to create a class, and I'm just going to call it indent, because I might be able to use this for other things as well, you know, like say like a unique paragraph or something else that I might need to use. Okay, so I'm going to just call that indent and open up with a curly brace and hit the enter return key, and I'm just going to simply type in margin, and we're just going to do margin left, and we're going to do 3 EM and hit the enter return key, and then right curly brace. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to my source code real quick and look for what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the table, and there it is right there. So I just was already kind of clicked in that area when I was on the design view, and so it just jumped me back into the code there. So here's what I need to do. I need to locate the table tag, which on my line is on line 64. It might be on probably give or take a few lines on yours. And I'm going to place the cursor right after where I have the width 85% border 0, and then I'm going to type in a space bar so my code hint comes up, and then I'm going to type in class, and then I'm going to hit the enter return key when that comes up, and you'll notice that that class that I just created shows up in my class list in the code hint. So all I have to do is hit the enter return key one more time. So let's see if this worked. So I'm going to jump over to live view, and boom, there it goes. It pushed it over just a little bit, so it kind of looks like what I have in my Word document. Okay, so I think we're pretty much wrapped up here in terms of the padding and spacing and everything else for our resume. A couple of notes here that maybe you want to change or mess with. You'll notice here that between my headings, my heading 2 and my paragraph, that there's quite a bit of space there. That's about 10 pixels worth, because if you remember right, we put padding on the top, bottom, on each of these elements. Sometimes what some people do is only put padding on the top rather than on the bottom. So you might do just padding on the left, padding on the top, and padding on the right. So that when you're spacing elements between each other, that you don't have as much spacing there. For me, I kind of like it the way it is. I like things nicely spread out, especially on a web document, and it makes things a lot more readable. So your call on that, on how you want to do your padding around each of those elements. Okay. So for you, this is pretty simple, a pretty easy and you know, quick and clean styling for our resume. If you want to add your own unique touches, that's for you to decide. My recommendation though is, with this tutorial, just leave it as it is, and then as you get down the road for your other pages, we can add different styling and flares to those things, and you can learn how to do those that I think would make your page look really nice. So in the next tutorial, we're going to focus on the home page and inserting the content for that for the portfolio.